Who is ready for our third and final speaker of the night? I don't think he needs much introduction, but I'll do it anyway. He is the host of my favourite radio show, Einstein A Go-Go Triple R on Sundays, Dr. Shane Huntington, who also has an Order of Australia medal. Yeah, how cool's that? Give it up for Shane.
See that? That's a lot of work my wife put into this t-shirt so that it match one slide. Anyway, how many of you have got a VHS recorder at home? Put your hand up, don't feel shame. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, we're going to talk about VHS for the rest of you. You guys can go. But what we want to do is just remember what it was like in the 80s, hence the intro track, and how so many things were great in the 80s. So I'm going to run you through where I started with regards to video cassette tapes and VCRs and all things like that. And I'm going to teach you how a video cassette recorder actually works, how VHS works. Because it's a glorious piece of technology that changed the world. Alright, so last time I gave a Nerd Night talk, there was a little clue that this talk was coming up. I was talking about time, but the bit that most of you, if you're here, would have missed was this. The JVC video cassette that was sitting right there on Marty McFly's shoulder. Okay? So this was a revolution at the time. I mean, we look at our phones now and we think, my God, look at the size of that thing. It weighs about 7 kilos. But back then, this was an amazing piece of technology that we really hadn't experienced before. Now, I'll tell you an interesting story in a moment, but I like to think of the video cassette as one of the greatest inventions the human race has ever achieved. I think it's extraordinary. And it did some amazing things which I'll go through that we couldn't do before. I love this whole area of technology because I worked in the film industry when I was young, when I was a teenager. Now, my amazing wife who's sitting up the back, she questions me when I say this. She says, you didn't work in the film industry. So I'm going to show you one of the advertisements from where I worked, and you can tell me whether you think I worked in the film industry or not. Okay. Ready? Some of you will recognise this immediately. See about a third of you. Show of hands, did I work in the film industry or was my wife correct? You traitorous bunch of nerds. Unbelievable. There were so many great things about working in the film industry though. Sorry, the video library. And it was a library, it wasn't a store. So if you anyone called it a store, it was a library, the video library. But I worked there for most of my teenage years and it put me through my PhD. Melbourne University likes to claim everything I've done. But actually, it was working in the video library where I learned how to interact with people, how to communicate, and every bit of knowledge I had basically came from watching too many films. So, a very formative part of my life. Now, I think a lot of things back in the 80s were just amazing. And there's things we know were better in the 80s too. So, for example, I think we can all agree that Tom Cruise was better in the 80s. Yeah? How many of you, I can't see all of you, but how many of you still hold a candle for the 80s Tom Cruise? Is there anyone who still loves the 80s Tom Cruise? Yeah. It's, well, keep your hands up. Would you put a poster up in your house of Tom Cruise from the 80s if you had one? No? Is there anyone in the room who would put a poster up of Tom Cruise in the house? Would you do that? You would put a poster up of Tom Cruise? Hello, okay. Ebony, bring out the item. That is yours, you can collect it after the show. I stole that from the Movieland Video Library in Footscray in 1988. Alright, so a lot of great things back then, but if we go back a little bit further, we had a problem. In the late 60s, you were told what to watch and when you could watch it. You couldn't record anything, there was no streaming, you couldn't say, I just want to watch Die Hard tonight and put it on. You could only watch a few channels and it was really restricted. And there were many groups in the world who were trying to solve this problem. There were a few video cassette recorders out there, but they were basically worth the cost of a car or a small house. And so they weren't for the average consumer. And there were some big reasons for that. They were very hard to construct, and essentially we didn't know how to do it at the time. So a lot of companies were trying to make video cassette recorders that would be good for the consumer. So let's think about how we would go about that. We've got some technology about 10 years earlier. We had cassette tapes for audio. So for some of you younger people in the audience, this is a cassette tape for audio. And we were able to record quite a bit of data on these, and the quality was quite good. But there was a problem with this, and the data was restricted. But let me show you. Here's one I prepared earlier from home. You can see here around where the green circle is, that's what we call the read head. That's how you read the magnetic information off the tape. That's how you store the information on the tape. And the problem we have with these things is that they don't go very fast, okay? So here's one in operation. You see it's turning around, and that tape travels at about 4.76 centimeters per second. Now, why don't we just add video? Can't we just add video to these tapes and get ourselves a nice video signal going? Well, let's do some maths for a moment and see whether or not that's possible. So it'll be gentle, don't worry. First of all, audio tape speed, we just had 4.76. Video needs about somewhere between 30 and 50 times that data. That means that little tape has to travel at 1.5 meters per second past the head to give us a video signal. Now, just do that in your head and think about how fast that goes. The whole thing would just fail. You can't make consumer products that fail really quickly. Actually, hang on. Hang on. What's that word? Enshittification. We didn't have that back in the 70s, right? The stuff just lasted. But we needed this guy, okay? This is essentially the father of television in Japan. He came out with the first ever transmission to a cathode ray tube of this symbol, the first letter in the Japanese alphabet. He essentially started television in many regards. And he actually was working for a company that you would know now. It was essentially JVC. Right? And JVC had this idea that they would no longer work with any other companies, but they would create their own video cassette recorder. So they asked Kenjiro, the father of television, to start producing a plan to make a video cassette recorder, to make VHS. Okay, so this was in 1971. This is a great year. It's the year I was born. And it was the year that they started thinking about this in a serious way. And they did it by coming up with something that they called the development matrix for VHS, or as I like to call it. Anybody? Yeah, you see it. This was a list of 12 requirements that a video cassette recorder would have to meet to be viable in the commercial space. They also thought about the social implications of what this would do, which I think is interesting. We don't do that anymore. But back there in 1971, JVC was thinking about, holy shit, this is going to start up this information society. What's going to go on if people can suddenly video things? And it was a good thought. But they came up with this idea. A couple of years later, JVC decided, due to a downturn in the marketplace, that they were going to cancel the entire project. But that team kept working in secret. And they developed the VHS video recorder in secret. Okay? All right. So, what does it look like? How does it work? So in this little box here, this amazing box. Sorry, have you ever held one of these? Who hasn't held one? You held one? Holy shit. Right, just hold that, and just hold it up to your ear. What can you hear? You can hear the 80s? Yes. This amazing little device is more complicated than we often give credit for. What we needed to do is we needed to record essentially 3 bits of data. The first was the audio track down the bottom. So this was much like on the audio tapes we saw, just a single line, nice and easy to read as the tape goes past a head. On the top, we needed to record a timing track. This allows you to connect the audio to the video signal so they go in sync, because no one likes it when they're out of sync. Right? But then the middle part of the tape, that's the big part in blue, this is where it gets fancy. You couldn't just record a straight line of data because you wouldn't get enough. So we had to find a way to squash more data onto a videotape. And the way they did this was they put lines of data at an angle. Right? So it squashed a whole lot of data in on the videotape. Now that sounds great, right? Lines at an angle. How the bloody hell do you read that? Right? This is where JVC and other companies were brilliant. They decided, well, we can't move this tape past the head very fast. So what if instead we rip the tape out of this box and wrap it around a head and move the head past the tape? Like, of course, that's exactly what you would do. And so they designed something that could read these lines at an angle very, very rapidly. And that way you could get all the frames of television coming through very quickly, and it would be just like a broadcast television set. This is the guts of every VCR. It's the head system. And what you can see down the very bottom here, if you can see it, is this little rectangle. That's the part that reads the tape. This head spins, and it spins on an angle to the tape, and every time it spins, it goes past one of these lines and reads the information. It's quite phenomenal. Okay, so let's have a look at what that actually looks like in reality. Here's a video cassette recorder that I hoarded earlier. My wife tells, she says I'm a hoarder because I have technology from 1985. Come on, we all have that, don't we? All right, so let's pop a tape in. In it goes. Yes, this is what it looks like inside. Now, on the left-hand side, this is the erase head. So if you want to record something, you have to run the tape past that first. We don't need to do that here. On the right-hand side is the head that reads the audio. That's the easy part. And the timing section. That's also easy. That amazing circular head is in the middle. If I show you another angle, you'll see that it is weirdly positioned at a slight angle so that it can read those angled lines. Okay? So let's see what it looks like in operation when we put the tape in. Because one of the interesting things is we have to pull the tape out of the cassette into this complex array of little jigs and wrap it around the head. So if you've ever seen a picture of someone pulling a tape out and the tape didn't come with the cassette, that's why. It's complicated. Right? And so it's running past that circular head. That head is running at 1,500 revolutions per minute. It's very, very fast. And it's reading it as it goes. So this is very different to an audio tape where remember the tape never leaves the cassette. In this case you have to pull the tape out to do it. And you can see it leaving the machine now, and then eventually this head will slow down once the system switches it off, and it will stop. Wait for it. Wait for it. There you go. Right? That's how you read a video cassette. So it is a very complex piece of machinery, and you can imagine these things broke down a fair bit because there were so many gears and little parts to them. But it allowed us to read incredible amounts of video data in a very, very easy way in your home at a price that everyone around the world could afford. And there were literally hundreds of millions of these things sold. It was an incredibly powerful technology. This is the original, one of the original JVC ads that went up in the UK. These things were big when they first came out. They weighed a lot. It was really hard to move them. And they did some amazing things, even from day one. Do not try and read that text. I made it deliberately small so you couldn't. They allowed you to record things while you weren't even home, which back then was just, it was a marvel that we could possibly do this. Okay, now I want to show you the original JVC ad. It gets a bit naughty towards the end because when they introduced the remote control, it was a difficult moment for many of us. Because as kids, we were the remote control.
This VHS home video system has every single function you will ever need. It was made by JVC, the people who invented VHS. A home video system so advanced, it's used in more sets around the world than any other. But the best invention we've ever come up with is our cordless remote control.
Anyway, now I've got two of these things. If you had two, that made you into a pirate. You could make copies, and there was a phone number that people would ring could dock you in. I didn't meet a single Australian that ever used this phone number. I imagine some guy who just got out from a D&D game sitting behind the desk waiting for this thing to ring, and it never happened. It just never happened. It was different in the US. They used the FBI, and if you were really unlucky and you got caught, you got 5 years jail. There's a couple of guys rotting in a jail somewhere saying to each other, "What are you in for?" "Weekend at Bernie's, man." "What are you in for?" "Beaches." What the hell? You know, video cassettes. They got smart though, and they introduced a new feature in video technology which jammed the signal. So you could not record from one to another. It was really problematic. This stopped a lot of video piracy. It was really helpful. First introduced with the Cotton Club. Alright, now the VHS system though had some natural predators. Does anyone know what those predators were? They're small and they eat a lot of food and they cost a lot of money. Kids, they would shove things in that front hole. I don't know why. They would shove things in. People would bring these things into me at the video library and they would say, "Shane, can you fix my VCR?" And that's where I need Ebony to help me out with this. Ebony, this is your little bag. We're just going to have a look at some of the things that I used to collect from VCRs. Just pull a couple of things out there, Ebony. What have you got?
Floppy disk.
Floppy disks. Lots of floppy disks. Yep, what else you got? Oh, a Nokia phone.
Can you still play Snake on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anything else in there that's interesting? Matchbox cars. Legos. Lots of Legos. Yeah, spanner. This is some of the stuff. All this sort of stuff. People would bring these machines in and they wonder why they were no longer working, and you'd sit there in front of them and you'd say, "Let me have a look," and you'd take the top off and then you just pull out a spoon and you'd hand it to them and say, "Could you hold this?" And they'd look at you like you're a magician. Anyway, that's the spoon. That's the actual spoon. Right, so we had some natural predators, and that was really problematic for VHS. The other thing, of course, is that a lot of people didn't rewind their tapes. This pissed people off. They wanted a version where you didn't have to rewind, right? I cannot tell you the number of times I shoved the tape in one of these dirty old disgusting machines, these rewinding machines, because if you gave someone a cassette that had not been rewound, it was like you had killed a puppy. And to be frank, when someone brought the videotape back to me that had not been around, it was like they'd killed a puppy. So, some natural predators, but there's some other things that were problematic. They wore out over time. The quality wasn't great. There were a few things that we didn't like about our old VHS tapes, despite the incredible aspects of the technology. And there were some big threats on the horizon. One of them was, these things were coming out that were smaller, cheaper. They lasted forever, like some kind of weird immortal being. They had a disgusting symbol. It's killed VHS. Killed it. DVDs came. The quality was better. Here's an example of what a video cassette tape image would look like. I'm going to run you through what it would look like if it was from a DVD. Yeah, a little better. Now you're all used to your Blu-rays, Ultra HD TVs, right? You see the difference now? That's what you're looking at now. How many of you can't even tell? Because your eyesight's just not that good. Right? Or you could just sit closer. Right? But look, I think it's fair to say that our television technology has improved in a phenomenal way, but what we forget sometimes is just how amazing VHS was. And VHS was around for a long time, like over 3 decades in a sense. First came out in 1976, and I bought my last machine in 2006. And they were still around long after that. I think the last one was produced by a small Japanese company in 2016. You still find them around now in some commercial places, but they're essentially all gone. And it's a bit sad, I find. However, there are still some people out there who are collecting these things, and they're turning off their streaming services in the hope of a disconnected world of VHS. That is not me. I love this technology. I grew up with this technology. I think it's phenomenal, but I am not going back to it. I mean, to be fair, it was good at the time, but my television back then was 1/6 of the size of the one I currently own. So if I put a VHS tape on my current TV, it will look like absolute garbage. All right. But if you're into it, You can get online. I saw some dude the other day, he had, over 300 titles. He was selling them for $450. He knocked the price down from $500. It's a bargain. He built the Great Wall of VHS in his backyard. It would have taken a while. I hope he checked the bomb app and just made sure it wasn't going to rain in the next few days. Anyway, there's obviously, these are mine. I do own 3 of them, as I often remind my amazing wife who's down the back, and I can't see her grimacing at me in the dark, which is good. But I have often said to her, when you own 2, you're hoarding. When you own 3, you're a collector. She has a powerful definition, which I won't ask her to read out of what a collector really is, and apparently I don't need it. But look, these things are amazing. The top one is the most phenomenal VCR ever made. I bought that in 1988, and it is immune to macrovision. You can pirate stuff on that one to your heart's content. I don't know why, something in the circuitry just didn't work. So, I know you love this. I know this is what you live for, just watching that little thing spinning around. I'll tell you, the number of times I'm sitting there watching this and I think, I could have got a video cassette tape in my machine and gotten past the previews before you even managed to see a single image. Yeah, days gone by. I don't want you to go back, any of you, to using VHS in your homes as a standard version of television, but I hope this presentation has given you just a little bit of respect for a technology that transformed the way in which we watched movies and television in our homes, what we could record, home movies, camcorders, the whole lot. And VHS was the absolute winner in terms of the various competing technologies at the time. So respect the tape, people. Respect the tape.
Say, Shane, I'm disappointed we didn't all get those t-shirts printed. We would have looked so good together. Alright, can I get some house lights? And yeah, okay, well, we'll start over here.
What was the last VHS tape you watched?
What was the last VHS tape that you watched?
The last one that I watched, I've got it right here actually. I'm going to use it one day to pay off my house. Yeah. Original Star Wars release back in the early 90s. It's worth about $3. It's been a while.
You at the front here?
The other story about the angle, is that something that was also used by competitors?
Yeah, look, I'm surprised it hasn't come up. I know the big elephant in the room is Betamax. Other companies did use it. In fact, the designers of the JVC VHS system saw the Betamax system that Sony was producing about 2 years, about 1974, about 2 years before they produced theirs. There is no doubt they were influenced. But there was a system called the U-matic system before all of them. And back then, Sony and JVC and many other companies all worked together. So they produced one system together. It was too expensive, too cumbersome, didn't work, and then they split off on different paths. And that big format war went on for many, many years, and there are many reasons why Betamax lost. But they all swore they'd never do it again. And then some of you will be aware that HD, DVD, and Blu-rays came out, and they did the exact same thing. They didn't do it for DVDs, which is interesting. But, yeah.
Can I get hands? Yeah.
You mentioned the sort of consideration at the end of the presentation.
Yeah.
Maybe you could say a little bit more about NT.
Yeah, look, I think, there were a whole lot of things going on at the time because, especially around piracy, I joke about the fact no one ever phoned that number because that was on the small scale stuff, but there were people pirating on large scale and selling them. I grew up in Western Melbourne, so you could go down to the Western market, buy whatever you wanted. But the issue around that, of course, was the same issue we're facing right now with all AI and other things, but artists were losing very large amounts of their revenue and money, and it was something that was hard to stop. And I think, for me, it always came back to, I worked in the video library where when we were able to provide people with something they wanted, they were happy to pay for it, for the most part. The problem was when they couldn't. And big problems occurred in Australia because the release dates were often 6 to 9 months behind the US. So they essentially created the problem they ended up having to solve. And I think if they'd been like in the audio system, music is worldwide release dates, and that didn't have the same impact. And so there were a lot of things like that that were problematic. I mean, there's bigger problems now with people videoing without consent and all sorts of stuff going on. But to be frank, if you were walking in with one of those JVC things on your shoulder, you've got time to run. If that person, it takes, you've got time to run, right? So it was a different era.
Yeah. I think one all the way at the back.
I have a hypothetical question.
Oh, that's my wife. Yes, darling.
Hale's a very smart person. I'm just wondering if you can chime in with how many VHS tapes do you think is, or VHS players do you think is a acceptable number in the home?
I don't like that you did that to me. How many VHS players is acceptable? It depends if they do different things.
The number is 3.
The number might be 1.5. I think.
It's like asking for half a hole.
Just figure it out, guys.
Thanks for the marriage counseling. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. That's $500. Just trying to see. Did you? Yeah, Mitko?
What's your favourite, quote-unquote, forgotten art form outside of VHS?
Forgotten art form outside of VHS. Look, for me, I actually think, things like Walkmans and that were amazing. Partly because, we still do it to a degree, but for those of you who are a little bit older in the audience, and you were sitting there waiting on the radio for that song to play so you could push record, and then some dipshit announcer spoke over the top of the first 10 seconds. But it was a glorious moment when you filled up that mixtape. We used to give out mixtapes like we were giving out roses. It had such credibility and there was so much to it. And I think for me, things like Walkmans, portable devices where we put more thought into what we had. I love my Spotify on my phone, and anything I can think of, I can listen to. But there was something about it. There was something tangible, and even I kept the sounds in those videos for you. The hand model wasn't me. The hand model putting the tapes in, because there was something about those sounds that some of us remember, and there's something about that it's great. So anything that's mechanical, I love.
Okay. I know. I'm trying to figure out who's hold up the longest. Red shirt at the back, I think.
Is it true that the video cassettes expire and why?
Is it true that they expire? Why?
Yeah, look, the magnetic tape that is made does wear out over time. I think it depends very heavily on the conditions they're kept in. So if it's like anything, photographs, things of that nature, if they're kept in a relatively dry, relatively cool place, they'll last a very long time. I've got tapes that I've had for 30 years that's still good, but it's a magnetic field. You put it next to a speaker, you put it next to something that has a strong magnetic field, you can wipe it out really easily. If you use them many, many times, they wear out too. This was a thin piece of plastic. It was easy to wreck it, and over time they did wear out. Whereas things like DVDs, CDs have a much longer time, especially the printed ones, not the ones we would write ourselves, but the stamped ones will last pretty much forever.
Yes.
So, what is actually the limiting factor on the amount of data you can still have?
Yeah, there's a few things. So first of all, those heads are a certain size, and you can imagine part of it is how fast you can run the speed and run that head. So you can only run it so fast before you have mechanical problems. Then it's how close you can get those lines. So think of these are little magnetic field lines. If they get too close, one will bleed over into the other, and you can't distinguish them. So VHS actually got to a very high level of data density towards the end of its run. So in fact, the videotape sitting right here is actually a super VHS videotape. And these ones would give you 500 lines. The original VHS was 240 lines. Beta was 250. You may have heard people say, oh, Beta was better, like by 10 lines, who cares? But the super VHS ones were 500 lines. Towards the end, right when it was dying, they managed to get 1,080 lines. which is what most of you watch as HD at home. So the technology got there eventually, but towards the end, most of the add-ons were things that were kind of fancy add-ons to the machine, because you just couldn't push it any further. So, you know, you had these little wands that could scan barcodes to record shows, and you had, you know, perfect still frame, and you had things that we just take for granted now. But at the time, you know, you couldn't do that. You couldn't pause and see what was on the screen. You know, just all impossible to read. So they added all these little gimmicks. That was the only way they could compete with each other. So.
Yeah, just here.
First question, when you say only lines, is that per inch or?
Sorry, on the television. So total number of lines on the television. So yeah.
And then my actual question, sorry, is what is the data? Like, what's the codec? What is the information?
How they're recording it.
Yeah.
Look, it's a non-digital format for VHS, so it's analog. It's just peaks and troughs, and they code in color, they code in contrast, and they code in timing. It's actually pretty simple. There's not a lot of, you know, it's not like the way you code in ones and zeros in a DVD or a Laserdisc were around a long time before that. And you know, coding in ones and zeros is actually, you know, a pretty sophisticated way of doing television, but it's digital. It makes everything really easy because you don't have problems with, so for example, if it's reading poorly, my color will be poor. Whereas on the digital system, if it's reading poorly, you don't get it at all. It's either on or it's off. So the VHS had these problems where they wore out. The quality would go down over time because of the way the encoding was working.
All right, and last question at the front here.
Yeah, on the example earlier, I'm just curious, I live in Jason, but how come you were able to make mixtapes so much more accessible than what I was printing DVDs?
Yeah, so look, mixtapes were a bit different because I think what was happening there was people were, for example, recording stuff off the radio, right? If you recorded something off the television, people didn't really care. What I experienced when I was in the video library is I would rent you this original tape, you would take it home, you would make a copy, you would open this tape up, you would take the spools out, you would swap it with the copy and give me back a copy. And every time you do that, the quality goes down. And they used to have this ad that would refer to an inferior pirated copy. Some of you may remember that. And it was because people were taking the originals out and sending back the copies. And there wasn't a lot we could do about it because we could never prove that it was that person. Right? So we don't watch them all when they come back to the video library, so we could never prove that. So it was like, what do you do? And so that was part of it. What was really problematic were when you'd find these centres where they had 50 or 100 video recorders and they were just churning out copy after copy after copy and selling them, you know, in markets on the street and so forth. And that was really, really problematic. So you recording something off your home television, it's exactly what the machines were designed for. You recording audio off the radio, exactly what they were designed for. I mean, the audio equivalent was bootleg music from concerts, which really wasn't a big deal by comparison. Yeah.
All right, put your hands together for Shane. So, unfortunately, that is the end of our night, and it is the time that we say our goodbyes. For the newbies here, we have a little spiel at the end of every night. So we are 100% volunteer powered, and we'd like to thank all of our volunteers at the end of the night, including myself and Ebony. Put your hands together for me. Ebony. He's not the third boss, but he's not here, so don't put your hands together. We also have a whole list of crew people here to make tonight happen. So we have Michael on video, Elise on photos, Nick who is our DJ for the night. We have David who made our fancy artwork, Phil who made the theme song, Matt who is making our YouTube. Stay tuned, every single Nerd Night Melbourne is going up on YouTube. And Tessa on sound and lights. Put your hands together for everyone. together for Where Are My Cells? To get out of the way, there's a QR code. You can see their online store. You can go see them in person right after I finish yapping. Put your hands together for Howler, our hosts. Limbs, our sponsors. And tonight's speakers, if I can get you all back on the stage, please. I'll continue. I'll buy us some time. Lastly, we need you to talk on this stage. We need nerds, we need nerdy concepts up on here. So if you know someone who is a nerd in something, or if you yourself are a nerd in something and you want to talk on this stage, please scan the QR code, email us, DM us, anything.
It's pretty easy to find us online.
We're everywhere. We want to hear from you, so please. And yeah, put your hands together for our speakers. And lastly, put your hands together for yourselves. This couldn't happen without you. Alright, that's it. Get home safe. Good night.
Quality of the audio was excellent last Really cool.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you.
I'd love to take that little section and just put it on my socials. I'd love it.